Hi peeps, I'm back. It's I don't know, been a month or so since I last did my last video, but I'm here. Let's do this. Yeah, I've been pretty busy this past month. Starting a new job, and I don't know. It's like even on days where I didn't have a ton to do, it always feels like I'm busy anyway. There's always stuff going on. So anyway, I'm here digging through my archives. I, as I've always mentioned in my past videos, as I go through my storage unit, my archives of thousands of records, I come across collections that I want to record to digital. And today, I'm going to be talking about some records that I pulled out of storage recently. I'm going to be talking about Nitzer Ebb. And with Nitzer Ebb, I've been trying to talk about individual albums lately. I don't want to talk about bands' full discography in one video because it's just so long. I learned my lessons last year. Like my first video I ever did was an Andy Weatherall video, and I only talked about half of the records I have from him, and it still took me over an hour. So I try to only talk about one album at a time because it's just easier for me to, or not easy, but it's easy for me to talk about music all day. That's the problem. That's what makes it hard because you guys aren't going to sit there and watch all of it. And I've seen the stats. I know you're not. So, my average viewer on YouTube, you have stats. They show you every little stat you want. And it shows you how many people watch which video, how long they spent watching certain videos. My average or your average length of time that you watch my ugly face is, I think, 7 to 8 minutes. So I have a feeling like maybe some of you are watching 5 or 6 minute intervals and turning it off and then watching the rest of it later. That's what I do personally. And, I don't blame you. I wouldn't want to look at this space for more than 5 minutes at a time either. So you want to go and do other stuff. I get it. But today, in the face of all of those facts, in denial to all of those statistics, I'm going to talk about my Nitzer Ebb collection. I'm not going to go on and on about a certain couple of albums of theirs because I don't love everything Nitzer Ebb did, but they had a period of time where I did love them and I still love them. And as I was recording all of my excuse me, Nitzer Ebb records recently, it dawned on me like, yeah, I have some things to say about this band. I have a long history with them. I started listening to them back in the, late 80s, late 80s when I was a kid. So I have a long history and relationship with this band. I've seen them a number of times live. So again, not to rattle on too much, but in honor of the rest of my videos and what I try to honor with all my videos, I try to talk about bands that I know a lot about. Because these videos are always off the top of my head. And that's why I always encourage you guys to correct me if I'm wrong, because all of this is off the top of my head. I'm not taking notes. This is just stuff that I know, stuff that I can recall. And I have a pretty good memory. So I try to, recall every little tidbit I can, or not every tidbit because we'd be here for hours, but the interesting tidbits if I can. So there's that. So I'm going to get to Nitzer Ebb, but before I do that, and I'm probably going to lose a lot of viewers right now, but I know I tend to always have a rant with most of my videos, and I do have a rant today. And people outside the United States, if you're watching this, I almost can guarantee you're not going to give a shit about this. But I think most Americans have an opinion about this, and I wanted to share mine. Now, I am a huge fan of film. I love movies and film every bit as much as I love records and music. In fact, I wanted to ask you people who watch this what you think of me talking about movies, because I love movies. For me, it's a little harder to talk about film on YouTube because I think you guys want to see physical copies of records. By the way, when I asked you guys if you want me to keep showing records, you unanimously said, yes, you do. So I'm going to keep doing that. I'm a little torn about that, but you guys want to see that and I have them, so I'll show them. It's less interesting to show a movie. You know what I mean? Like, look, This is a recent Blu-ray I got, but I'm very passionate about movies, and I upgraded my TV a few months ago. I had this big, nice 4K bomb-ass television, and I upgraded everything. My sound bar. I've got this insane setup. So I spend just as much time talking about movies that I do music. I tend to talk about movies on my website. I've only written a couple of pieces on my site. I'm a writer by trade. I'm not an orator at all. So I tend to want to write about stuff, and film to me is easier to write about. But you guys tell me what you think. What would you think about me talking about movies? Because I love movies, love them every bit as much as I love music. All right. So, Nitzer Ebb. Nitzer Ebb. I learned about Nitzer Ebb, I don't quite remember. I think I remembered them. I think I discovered Nitzer Ebb through Depeche Mode. Um, Back in the late 80s, Nitzer Ebb would support Depeche Mode, and they'd go on tour together, and they would perform together, and they were releasing albums together and at the same time, and they were both on Mute Records together. So, they knew each other. They were on the same label. They had the same producer, Flood. So I think by virtue of that, I think a lot of Depeche Mode fans were also Nitzer Ebb fans, and I was a huge Depeche fan. So I think my intro to Nitzer Ebb was Join in the Chant. I think that's probably, even to this day, what everyone's entry point to Nitzer Ebb is. It's Join in the Chant, and which is a great song, far from their best, but I'll get into that. I'll get into that in a minute. I think what I loved about Nitzer Ebb when I first heard them was they had a punk ethic to them, but it was with electronics. There are no guitars. There is none of that grandstanding and posturing like you got with rock music, especially in the 80s, where it was rampant. A lot of hair metal, a lot of posturing, a lot of douchebags making rock music. But they had this punk energy, but with electronics and drum machines and samples. And there was a lot of industrial music at that time, but Nitzer Ebb was something more than that. They absolutely had industrial influences and industrial imagery, but their songs had something a little more than that. They were steeped in techno and house and dance and disco music. So it was like, it was one of those moments where a band, it was one of the first times I can remember hearing electronic music being packaged and delivered as punk music. And also what helped their sound too was Doug McCarthy, the singer. He's got this big growling, booming, like kind of voice, very aggressive, very aggro. And the energy is very aggressive. It's very intense. And that's something that grabbed me right away about their sound. So yeah, I learned of them through this other music, I think, where it was similar in sound. I think another good example of that punk ethic being introduced through electronic sounds is Fad Gadget, Frank Tovey. He's another person I want to make a video about. As I get older, I realize like not a lot of people know who Fad Gadget is and Frank Tovey, which to me is amazing. Those of you out there who like not just electro pop, but like punk and industrial and like bands like Ministry, who I've talked about in length, you need to listen to Fad Gadget. They are, it was one person and he's dead now, but Frank Tovey was very instrumental in sort of bridging the gap between punk and electro pop, kind of marrying those two things together. And he used to tour with Depeche Mode. In fact, he toured with them on their Exciter tour right as he died. I mean, he died of a heart attack right after that happened. But anyway, that's another video. Nitzer Ebb, to me, was punk music. It still is, especially their first album. But when I talk about the albums here and singles and my records I do have from them, I'm going to talk about them in order as I like them. Basically, I'm going to rank their albums. Instead of doing it chronologically, I'm going to talk about the albums that I like least and then work my way up to the one that I like the most. just to shake it up a little bit. So now I do want to say there are a couple of albums of theirs that I don't have on vinyl. I've heard them, but I don't have physical copies of them. One of them is their last album, Industrial Complex. To me, it's clearly their worst album. It came out way after they had disbanded back in the 90s. It's not a bad album, but I don't think it's their greatest album. I feel like they were trying to capture something that they had done years earlier at a different time where it didn't make a ton of sense. It's not bad. It's just, and quite frankly, I haven't had the kind of experience with it that I have with these older albums. I've only heard it a few times and it didn't really grab me. It wasn't anything that I needed to hear again. So, but yeah, I think it was 2010 they put that out, Industrial Complex. Again, I don't have it, so I can't hold it up and show it to you, but I have heard it. Definitely one of, you know, I'm not going to add it with their first 5 albums because I feel like there was a progression with their albums during the years between 86 and 95 where they put out 5 albums and a number of singles. And I'm going to talk about those mainly. So Industrial Complex, don't have a lot of experience with it, but I didn't love what I heard. The other one that got released just a few years ago, I think, is Basic Pain Procedure, and it's basically their first demo cassette. Again, I've heard it. I don't own it. It's one of those albums that I feel like isn't quite fair. It's not a studio album. It's just kind of a collection of their first demo tracks and stuff. And it didn't get released at the time. It did get released on a cassette, but nobody heard it. And some of those tracks I think ended up on their first album, and I'll talk about that at some point. But yeah, again, I'm not going to talk about that one because I don't have it. I have heard it though, and I like it. You know, it's their early stuff is pretty cool. It's pretty intense and raw, and I dig it. But because it didn't get released at the time, I think it's kind of tricky to talk about. So I'm going to leave that one out. So I'm going to get to the records I actually have. I held this one up earlier. I hold this up first because this is a compilation, So Bright, So Strong, and it basically compiles their early stuff. You'll see it's got a number of mixes of Warsaw Ghetto on it, Crane, you know, it's got a bunch of early stuff. Let me see. Oh, The Way You Live, Isn't It Funny How Your Body Works, Cold War. Those first couple of tracks are from their first EP, which is really good, actually. It's just raw. That's probably their most punky sounding thing they ever did. And then it compiles the Warsaw Ghetto and So Bright, So Strong tracks here, which was a single they put out. And then Get Clean, which was a B-side, which would later get released as a single, like a decade later. I don't have that 12-inch. I just have it on this comp. But I would recommend picking this up if you like their early stuff. This is a good place to start. And yeah, it definitely has a mix of that early punk vibe they had. And then they bring in Phil Harding, who was like a dance guy, to do the Warsaw Ghetto mixes, which actually, I don't like his mixes all that much. I think the original version of Warsaw Ghetto was much better. So yeah, not worth picking up. So I'm going to start with my least favorite Nitzer Ebb album, not including Basic Pain Procedure and Industrial Complex. And that is this big hit. This came out in 95. Not a good album. And as I was recording these to digital last week, and I revisited all these records, everything I'm going to show you here, I just recorded in the last few weeks. I revisited this album thinking, you know, sometimes you hear an album when it comes out and you don't like it, and then you hear it years later and you're like, oh, wow, that's actually pretty good. Like, what was I thinking? This is a solid album. This album still stinks. I'm sorry. It wasn't good then, and it's not good now. I think Nitzer Ebb, they were having their grunge moment. You know, Doug McCarthy's got these crooning vocals and he's trying to sing, and they've got these crunchy guitars and they're trying to thrash around like Nirvana or something. It just didn't work. And I can understand they're trying to do something different. I get it. It's cool. They got tired of their sound. They wanted to branch out. Bands do that. I get it. And these guys were always kind of an experimental band, so they wanted to try something different. Didn't work. Big Hit is a mess. Yeah, it's just ill-advised in my opinion. It wasn't good then. I remember hearing it at the time thinking, what in the world is this? And I had the same reaction when I ripped this last week. I was like, what on earth is going on here? They were very misguided. I think they probably knew this was their last album. It's produced by Flood, who did all their other records, but not all of them actually. Well, no, I think he had a hand in everything they did except their first album. Anyway, not good, man. And part of the problem too, and I'll get to that right now, is the singles they chose to release from it. This is the better of the two singles that got released. This is Kick It. Actually has a pretty good Chris Needs mix. He was the guy who was Secret Knowledge. He did a lot of techno, kind of trancey stuff. And then it's got an Adrian Sherwood mix on it. It's got a couple of Paul Kendall mixes. Paul Kendall was somebody who worked with Nitzer Ebb all along. He produced a lot of their B-sides. I'll get to that in a bit here, but this is a pretty actually decent 12-inch. Not because of the original version, but the mixes you get on here. Not a bad one. I like it. Actually, let me make sure. I try to make sure that everything is viewable here. This is the other single, I Thought. This is a bad song. This is just it's no wonder people didn't buy the Big Hit album when this is what they're using to promote it. A nice, cool, glossy sleeve. The jacket itself is cool, but the track listing's weak. I Thought is like a weird ballad. It's McCarthy's trying to croon and he's getting sensitive with his lyrics and their guitars gently strumming. It's like, who is this? Is this Nitzer Ebb? Come on. Not a good choice for a single. In fact, I would argue this is the worst song on the album. And the mixes aren't very good. Barry Adamson comes in and does a remix of it. Adamson is another person that Nitzer Ebb worked with a lot. Just not great, man. That was the way that's how they promoted the record with singles like that. Didn't work. This is a promo of I Thought, though. This is better than the commercial version. It's got a Paul Kendall remix of I Thought called Final Sin, which is really good. He kind of makes it this weird down tempo, which is the song already is, but he makes it this electro acid jam. He extends it to like 8.5 minutes, and it's cool. I would recommend getting this promo 12-inch just for the Final Sin mix. I'll also mention too, they re-released all of these records. I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, I want to say. These have all been repressed, and there's a bonus disc of like B-sides and remixes, and I think the Final Sin mix of I Thought is on the reissue of Big Hit. I think. I don't know. You might want to look that up. I don't have the reissues, so I can't speak to them, but I'm sure plenty of you do. I would assume more people who are watching this video probably have the reissues rather than the original pressings like I have. So I'd love to hear how those pressings are. I haven't heard them. I have no experience with them, but it would be cool. And it was cool to see that it was done. When I was looking at the track listings, I thought, wow, that's cool. I almost bought the box set of all of them, but I was like, there's nothing on these box sets that I don't already have. So it just didn't make a lot of sense to spend all that money to have them again. But those of you who have those represses, I'd love to hear your thoughts on them. I haven't heard anything on them. So now I'm moving on. That was the Big Hit album. I don't have a ton to say about it. That is positive. I could sit here for another 20 minutes and talk about what I don't like about it, but I'm not going to do that. I'm moving on to this. This is a pretty cool, this is the As Is EP. This is the American version on Geffen. I still have my shrink wrap on it. You can see the little hype sticker is still there. This is a cool EP. The draw of this EP was 4 tracks, all produced by different people. You've got Family Man, produced by Jazz Coleman of Killing Joke. Another band I should do a video on. I love Killing Joke. Love Sick, produced by Flood. And if you don't know who Flood is, go look him up. I was thinking about doing a video just on Flood. and all the stuff he's produced. The guy has had his hands all over tons of great records. You probably know him, and if you don't know him, you probably heard him and you don't know it. So Flood is a genius producer. Come Alive, produced by none other than Alan Wilder of Depeche Mode, who would go on to produce this next album I'm going to talk about. And then Higher, produced by Barry Adamson, formerly of Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. And yeah, Barry Adamson was someone that they brought in a number of times to do production work and remixes and things like that. So that's a good EP. This is Ebb Head. This is my next one down as I rank the albums. This was actually better than I remember. When this came out initially, as you can see, I must have bought this used, or no, yeah, I might have done this. They put a price sticker on it. I tore it off like a moron. So the cover's all torn up. But, you know, it's a nice package. Comes with a nice inner sleeve. Anyway, I didn't love this album when it first came out. I didn't get it. It was just different. It wasn't different in a way that I approved of at the time. I was so into rave and techno and dance music in 1991 when this came out. I think I kind of excused this album. But as I was ripping this a couple weeks ago, I really enjoyed it. I liked it more than I've ever liked it. It really holds up well. This was produced by Alan Wilder. And yeah, it's just got some really good songs on it. There's really not a bad track on here. Yeah, something that has grown on me quite a bit, Ebb Head. They sort of, you know, well, not sort of. Was the moment they kind of ditched the straight up dance music that they were doing, and they were trying something different. Slower jams, a little more rock and roll in there, like the track Godhead, for example, is pretty punk rock, straight up punk rock with guitars. Yeah, this was a very cool album. And I was happy to listen to it a few weeks ago. I was like, man, this is way better than I remember. And it's a good pressing. Again, someone who has the reissue of this, tell me how the reissue is, how it sounds. But this original UK vinyl sounds good. Still sounds good. It was a good pressing. It's on Mute. You know, Mute never put out any bad pressings. But yeah, Ebb Head really grew on me. It was something that I was surprised to hear because I remember not liking it. But listening to it after all these years, it's probably been 25 years since I've listened to it. I was like, damn, this is pretty good. What was I missing before? I just wasn't ready for it. You know what I'm saying? That happens sometimes with music. You revisit it. It's like a movie. You didn't like it years ago, and now your life has changed, and you've had experiences, and now things are different. But yeah, Ebb Head, good record. All right, moving on to the next one. So this was the opening single for Ebb Head. And it came out in two different editions. This is I Give to You, the 12-inch and the 10-inch. A good song, not a great single in terms of like B-sides and remixes, but a cool song all the same. I like the original version. There's a couple of Barry Adamson remixes on here that are pretty good, but I Give to You isn't really a song you remix, you know. It's kind of a slower, not a ballad, but it's a slow, dramatic song. It's not really something you remix. So, but the remixes are pretty decent. They're not bad. And the B-side is an old Rolling Stones track called Stray Cat Blues, I think, right? Stray Cat Blues. Yeah, Stray Cat Blues. Not a bad song, produced by Paul Kendall again. Paul Kendall released or remixed and produced a lot of their B-sides. He just always did. And Paul Kendall was one of those in-house mute guys who did remix work for Depeche Mode. And that was a cool thing about Mute. Like their bands were always remixed by this core of people that worked for Mute. Like Depeche Mode had, these guys were like Mark Saunders, John Fryer, Daniel Miller, the guy who owns Mute, Paul Kendall. These guys would remix the Mute bands, and they would always produce really good stuff. Gareth Jones was another name that you saw on a lot of these Mute records. They would remix Nitzer Ebb, Depeche Mode, Erasure, Fad Gadget. You saw these guys' names on all these Mute bands, and Daniel Miller, and they were always good. Always good. Like, a lot of people were going outside to find remixes, but not Mute. Mute kind of picked from this core of people within Mute, and they always delivered. Their mixes were always good. Anyway, I don't want to go too far into the weeds there, but check out those names. This was the next single taken from Ebb Head. This is Godhead. It was a double 12-inch. Got the green cover, and then this one with a red cover in the back. This is a weak single. Godhead's a good song. There's a remix of Godhead that's a little more heavy metal-ish on here. But yeah, this is a weak single, man. It just did. They released it on 2 records, and each record has like 3 4-minute tracks on it. It's got a collection of live songs. Nitzer Ebb live, I'm sorry, but they were never anything to write home about. They basically just played a backing track of the album version and then yelled over it. At least in this time, they just were not a good live band. Every time I saw Nitzer Ebb live, it was disappointing. They just weren't good live. And they put live tracks on here. So it's basically you get one mix of Godhead, which is just subtly different than the original album version. Then you get 5 live songs, which, yeah, weren't good. So yeah, just a dumb single. They could have put all those songs on one record, but they, as a money grab, they put them all on 2 records, and yeah, not a good choice. That leads me to the third and final single of Ebb Head, which is Ascend. This is the best single from the album, I think. This is a double 10-inch. The other 10 inches down here, but this is Ascend 1 and Ascend 2. Basically has a collection of remixes, and yeah, it's actually a really good single. Flood does a couple of remixes. Mark Stagg does a mix. It's good stuff. And then this is the promo of Ascend. This is noteworthy because it has a Vince Clarke remix of Ascend, which I think is the best remix. And it's only on this promo that I know of. It might be on another format, I don't know. But in terms of vinyl, this is the only place I've ever seen it. And of course, Vince Clarke is from Depeche Mode and Yaz and Erasure. He does a really solid remix there. So it's worth picking up that promo, I think. So that's Ebb Head. Moving on to my third favorite Nitzer Ebb album. This is where I'm going to try to not breeze through it, but there's a lot of records. There are a lot of records to talk about, singles and other, remixes and B-sides. The next 3 albums had a lot of stuff. So my third favorite is this, Showtime. Came out in 1990. You can kind of see it right there, 90. There's the back cover. This is this is the US issue on Geffen. I'm assuming the inner sleeve is similar to the one on Mute in the UK. I don't know that I've ever seen a UK issue, but this is a really cool album. And I remember I saw them on this tour when they were supporting Depeche Mode. This album came out around the same time as Violator did with Depeche Mode. And I remember I saw Depeche Mode on that Violator tour twice, and Nitzer Ebb opened for them. So they were banging out a lot of tracks that were on this album. They only had 3 albums up to this point that we knew of. Basic Pain Procedure was another album, but that wasn't released. So no one had really heard that one. Not many people, at least. But anyway, Showtime's a good album produced by Flood. It was kind of like a change from their previous 2 albums a little bit. There were dance cuts, and the dancier tracks were all singled out as singles. Getting Closer, Lightning Man, and Fun to Be Had. Those were the 3 singles, and I'll get to those. Those are the 3 just outwardly dancey tracks, but then the rest of these tracks are kind of more down-tempo, jazzy, funky, a different style. It's cool. It worked. It's all based in electronics, but there's a much more human, organic feel to this record. Again, produced by Flood. And yeah, this sort of marked a shift. It was sort of like a bridge to what they had done before and what they were going to be doing in the future. And it's a nice combination of stuff. Very good album. As I was ripping this the other day, it was like, damn, I love this album at the time, and I still like it a lot. It's aged well. For an album that's electronic and came out 32 years ago, it still sounds pretty good. Now, this was the opening single from the album. This is Lightning Man. I don't know, another price sticker tear. What are you going to do? Lightning Man with B-side Who We Are, which has a Holger Hiller remix of that, of Who We Are. I don't know that it's a remix. I've heard the original 7-inch version, and it's basically the exact same version. This one's a couple minutes longer and better. I think this one's better. This has a slightly different mix of Lightning Man too. I think a lot of people assume it's the album version, but it's not. It's a Flood remix. And to my knowledge, you can't find this remix. I don't know. I've heard the UK CD single and the US 12-inch of this, and none of those have this Flood remix that you find on this. And frankly, I think it's arguably the best mix of the track. It sounds a lot like the album version, but it's a little dancier. It's got a different intro. It's a really good mix. Now, this is the remix 12-inch of Lightning Man. Cool cover, I think. Got some glossy lightning bolts here. Different color. Now, this has remixes from Daniel Miller, the great Daniel Miller, and the even greater Renegade Soundwave. And I've talked about Renegade Soundwave in the past. They deliver a really killer remix here. And Daniel Miller's mix is good too. If I were to only buy one of the two Lightning Man 12 inches, it would be this. The remixes are awesome. Really good stuff. Now, this was the next single released. This is Fun to Be Had, an old price sticker. I don't know. I must have gotten this at a record fair. It's anyway, this is Fun to Be Had. It's got a remix of Getting Closer and a B-side, Out of Mind. Cool cover. You get the little, you can't really see them, but they're little glossy eyes right here all over it. Let's see if I can, is there a way to see those? Yeah, I don't know. There are these little glossy eyes all over the cover. You can't really see them. Fun to Be Had is not my favorite Nitzer Ebb song, and the remixes are definitely not my favorite. They pulled in the Dust Brothers and George Clinton to do the remixes, which is really cool and sort of unusual. I remember at the time it was like the Dust Brothers, and this is the original Dust Brothers, not the Chemical Brothers, the Dust Brothers who produced Paul's Boutique and Beck and, you know, that Dust Brothers. They do a remix of here, and it's all right. Fun to Be Had was a track that was begging to be remixed, and the people that did remix it at the time, they didn't do a very good job, I thought. The B-side, Out of Mind, is very good, though. I like that one a lot. And this is the other Fun to Be Had release. This has a big N here, a glossy N. I'm trying to see. There you go. The light can kind of reflect it. You see that? That big N? Yeah. And you get a big E on the back. Anyway, there's the track listing. This is the one with the George Clinton remix of Fun to Be Had. You get another remix of Getting Closer. And then Taken From Me, Servant mix. I never heard Taken From Me original mix. I've never seen it. I don't know if it exists. If someone knows about it, please let me know. I'd love to hear it. Again, the George Clinton remix of Fun to Be Had, not great in my opinion. A missed opportunity. The Getting Closer mixes are pretty good though. And again, Taken From Me is a good B-side. Nitzer Ebb had good B-sides. They always did. This is a US promo. Which one is this? This is Fun to Be Had. This has some additional George Clinton and Dust Brothers mixes all over it. Again, there's sort of slight variations of their remixes. One, like the George Clinton, there are 4 George Clinton mixes on here, but one's a long one, and then there's an edit, and then there's an instrumental, and it's, you know, they don't deviate much at all. They're just shorter, longer, not great. And then this is Getting Closer. This is the US. I don't think Getting Closer didn't get released as a single in the United States, or in the UK, sorry. This is a United States press. 4 mixes of Getting Closer, 3 of which are by Tony Garcia, who was one of those hired guns in the US market. A lot of bands, when the American market would need to promote a single in the United States, they had this core group of remixers they'd go to provide exclusive remixes for the US market. Tony Garcia is one of those guys. His mixes are pretty good too. My favorite though is the Pool mix, which is Paul Kendall. His mix is kind of cool. It's down tempo and kind of jazzy. My favorite mix of the bunch. I brought this up. This is a promo of Getting Closer. It has a remix called the Stupid Mix on here. But it's not Nitzer Ebb. It's some completely different track. I don't know. I thought I'd show this just for curiosity's sake. If you ever see this and think the Stupid Mix is some rare exclusive mix of Getting Closer, it's not. It's some weird random house track. It has nothing to do with Nitzer Ebb. Anyway, I thought I'd share that. And as I was going through my stuff too, the rarest record I have from Nitzer Ebb, I don't have in front of me. I don't know where it is. I can't find it. But they re-released a US promo only of Fun to Be Had. And it's got a collection of Dust Brothers mixes on it that are all exclusive to that promo. And I don't have it. I remember playing it in a DJ set like 4 or 5 years ago. And what I tend to do is I pick records out of my collection so I can play them in a set. And then I put them back in a different spot. And then I forget where they are. So that's what I did. There's a promo of Fun to Be Had out there, though, US only on Geffen, that has 4 Dust Brothers mixes on it. They're called like the Sneeze mix, I think like the Rave mix. If you can find that, get it. I've only ever seen one copy in my life, and I got it through one of the record pools I was in back then. Never seen another copy like it. So grab that one if you ever see it. Okay, so that's Showtime. Very good album, good singles, not the best remixes on Fun to Be Had. Now, this is my second favorite Nitzer Ebb album. This is That Total Age. And this is kind of a compilation in a way, and new tracks too. It's got a couple of older tracks that are redone here, and then new tracks. And this is a really cool album. Like I explained before, here's the inner sleeve. This is the US version, by the way. It's the inner sleeve. This, if I can get it back in there without tearing it up. This was my intro to Nitzer Ebb. I think a lot of people, this is a lot of people's intro to them. This is their first album. And, you can see through the imagery, like it's very mechanical, almost, you already can kind of sense this aggressive feel to it. And then the music is aggressive too. But techno, electronic punk, it's a different sound. At the time, there just wasn't a lot of music that sounded like this. It was very original. And I remembered the first time I heard Fitness to Purpose, the first song on this album, it blew my mind. I still remember the time I first heard that song. I was like, whoa, what is going on here? It was techno punk. I mean, that's what I heard. It was techno punk. And to this day, it sounds good. When I was ripping this a few weeks ago, I was like, this still sounds great. Excellent album. My second favorite of their catalog. A great place to start too. If you're getting into Nitzer Ebb, you just want to start here. You want to work your way up through the albums. This is a great place to start. Really cool album. Came out in 1987, obviously. It had different producers on it. Daniel Miller produces a track. Phil Harding produces a couple of tracks. I think actually Phil Harding produces most of the album. And then there's a Daniel Miller mix on it of Let Your Body Learn, I think. I think Daniel Miller does that remix. The rest of them are all produced by Phil Harding. Anyway, a great, very cool start to an era of music that had aggression to it and some real humanity to it, but was steeped in electronics, because electronics was always sort of known to be, mechanical, synthetic. This put a human spin on it. Someone screaming, yelling over the top, and politicized lyrics. And really good album. Highly recommend that to anybody who likes punk or electronic or just soul music. It's good stuff. Doug McCarthy's screaming over the top. Great vocalist for this kind of music too. Just a very commanding, dominant, aggro, masculine voice. and a lot of people refer to this kind of music as electronic body movement music, but whatever. They call it EBM, which I always thought, I don't know. I always thought of EBM as like, dudes without their shirts on, sweating and dancing and marching. And there's almost like a fascist tone to it. But that's not what Nitzer Ebb was doing, I don't think. You could call it EBM if you want, but to me, it was just dance music. I mean, that's what punk was. Punk music sort of, I think the rave scene is a direct extension of what punk did. It's all dance music, underground. That's what that total age is. Join in the chant. Now, I don't know. I don't know that this was the first single from the album. In fact, I don't think it was. But we all know Join in the Chant. There's 3 mixes here. I'm not going to go on about this too much. We all know this. Join in the Chant. This is their most well-known song. Definitely not their best song, I don't think. I'll get to their best song, but that's Join in the Chant. This is another US edition. Let Your Body Learn. It's got a mix of Warsaw Ghetto. This mix is also on that So Bright, So Strong compilation that I held up earlier. But yeah, here is, let me see, make sure I got all these in the right order here. Let Your Body Learn. This is a good song, good mixes. Phil Harding does these mixes. This got released in the UK as well, I think. Pretty sure it did. And I'm not holding up everything that I have from these guys. I have a couple of Nitzer records that are misplaced somewhere else, but that's basically, they released Murderous as a 12-inch too, and I think that's with my Fun to Be Had promo. I remember playing that in one of those sets too. So Murderous came out as a single. There are no remixes of it really from that time. There's an instrumental version of it. It got later remixed, which I'll talk about here in a minute. But at the time it wasn't remixed. There's just an instrumental version of it. But Murderous is a 12-inch. So yeah, that total age was, I don't know, that was ground zero for a lot of people in terms of like punk music sort of accepting and marrying this electronic aesthetic. It was cool. It still is. When I hear it, it just represents all the kind of shit that I was discovering at the time. And there's a lot of stuff to discover. So yeah, great album. Pick that up if you can. Now, this leads to my favorite album from Nitzer Ebb. Their second album came out in 1989, end of 88. I think it came out at the very end of 88, very beginning of 89. And that is this, Belief. This, in my mind, encapsulates what made Nitzer Ebb so damn good. This is the UK edition on Mute, by the way. There's a US, this came out on vinyl in the US too. There you go, 1989, Derp. Came out in 1989. But I think it was January. It came out right at the beginning. This UK edition has this little obi strip here. This isn't part of the jacket. This is a strip. And the US edition did not have this strip. So if you see a copy of this and you don't see this, well, they don't all have it. The UK edition is the inner sleeve, got some credits, a logo. I always like their imagery too. Very simple colors, but very in your face and broad at the same time. Very cool imagery. I always like this cover. It's very simple, but I like that. I like minimalist. Very cool album. My favorite Nitzer Ebb album. And why is that? Because of the songs and the associated singles. I think if you buy an album and you have all the singles with it, you listen to the remixes and the B-sides and you sort of melt that into the album experience and you come up with a broad idea of what that record is. And I think this album combined with the singles is their best album. This was a big step up from that Total Age, but not entirely different from it. I feel like in a way Nitzer Ebb never quite evolved past this. They made records after this, but this was them at their best. I felt like they did some slower tracks really well. They did the faster up-tempo aggressive tracks really well and mixed it all together really well as a cohesive, fluid album. in those terms, I think Belief is their best album, because I think Nitzer Ebb suffered on every record they did other than this one. Every album they did, it almost felt like a collection of tracks. There's no cohesion to their albums. Their albums were good, but they didn't flow. This one flows from top to bottom. From beginning to end, I think there's a real cohesive flow to it. As an album, I think you can just drop the needle down and listen to it, and it all sort of gradually builds and builds naturally until the very last song. And it's just their best album for me. Now, talking about the singles, and this is where it gets good, in my opinion, because the best versions, the best tracks they ever did are on these singles I'm about to talk about. This is the lead off single from that album. Now, this came out in 1988. Maybe this is what I'm thinking of when I want to say 1988. This came out toward the end of 1988. Control M Here. Really cool remixes. I think most of the mixes are done by Flood himself. I don't know if they brought in anybody else. Look. Yeah. The New Funk Brutalism they put on there on the back. New Funk Brutalism. It's a good way to describe Nitzer Ebb, I think. But a couple of really cool remixes here. Hardcore Mix, Command Control Confront, and then KIA, which is the B-side. Excellent lead-off single, really cool, upbeat, fast, screaming vocals, a BPM that's probably around 125, 130. Just like early like techno jams, you know, with Doug McCarthy screaming over the top. Good stuff. This is the second. In the UK, they did this a lot. They released two different versions of the same single, so you'd buy them and get the remixes and the B-sides. Mute Records did this a lot, especially. Their bands like Nitzer Ebb, Depeche Mode, Erasure, most of their singles back then had two different 12 inches. This is 12-inch number 2. This has another remix of Control M Here, and then it has a remix of KIA, and then it has Join in the Chant. Sort of an odd, you know, collection of tracks here, but worth having. And then this is the US edition of Control M Here. This took further remixes from the UK CD single and put them on here. And then to further complicate things, Geffen mistitled the names of these mixes. Like it says you get the hardcore mix here, but it's not the hardcore mix on this. It's the 0 option mix. And then it also says that you get the Strategic Dance Floor Initiative mix, but you don't. You get the club instrumental mix. So the tracks are kind of fucked up on this release. But it's worth getting. If you want all the different mixes, you need to get this in addition to these other 2 UK ones, if you want all the mixes. So that's worth picking up too. And I can't imagine it's very hard to find or expensive. Now, this is my personal favorite Nitzer Ebb record. If I could only keep one Nitzer Ebb record, it would be this one, Hearts and Minds. Excellent single. This is the US edition, and there are differences with tracks, and I'll explain that. This US edition has both remixes of Hearts and Minds, and the hypersonic mix of Hearts and Minds is the best track they ever did. For me personally, the greatest track they ever did. The album version is great, but Daniel Miller stepped in and did a remix, and it is excellent. One of the best dance tracks of all time, in my opinion. Definitely one of the greats of the 80s. But Daniel Miller stepped in and he knocked it out of the park with his remix of Hearts and Minds. It's the hypersonic mix. Excellent. The first 3 minutes, it's just like a buildup. There are no vocals. He's just building it up with this heavy bass-laden beat, and then he finally drops the vocals in and then goes back to the beat. And it's just a great, masterful remix. One of the great remixes of all time. If you want to hear one of the best remixes ever, get this record, Hearts and Minds. And this is the US edition. This US edition is unique because it has the full version of Captivate, the William Orbit mix. It can be kind of confusing because the William Orbit remix got released in the UK too, and I'll talk about that in a minute. but it's the edited version. This version on this US 12-inch is the full orbit mix, unedited. So that's the reason you want to get this if you're a Nitzer fan. This is the UK edition of Hearts and Minds. It's got the hypersonic mix. It also has a remix of For Fun, which is not on the US version. And it also has the original version of Time Slips By, which is not on the US version. So reason to pick that up. And then this is the remix, the UK remix edition of Hearts and Minds. It's got the subsonic mix, which was remixed by Flood. And then it's got the album version of For Fun. I don't know why they put the album version on it. Seems like they could have put another mix on there, but they didn't. And then it's got the PK remix of Time Slips By, which is on the US 12-inch. So you're not getting anything that you don't get on the US one with this one, other than a different cover, and you see the little glossy remix. You know, it's a cool cover. It's worth having if you're a Nitzer fan, as I am. This is another fantastic single from, this was the last single from Belief, Shame. This is the 7-inch I have stuffed in here. This has remixes from William Orbit. Does he do both? Actually, let me look. Yes, he remixes Shame, and then he remixes Captivate on the B side. Now, this is the edited version on this 12-inch. It's like 6 minutes, but the one you get on the US one's over 7. Why they shaved it off here, I don't know. There's only one mix on both sides of the record too, so there's more than enough space for it. They just, I don't know, it's an edited version here. And then the 7-inch here has the original version of Backlash, which is a excellent song, arguably better than most of the tracks on the album. Backlash is a excellent single in itself. It could have been a good single. And then that leads to Shame number 2. And these are UK. Shame didn't get a release in the US. Control I'm Here did. Hearts and Minds got a US release as well. Shame did not. This version of Shame has a Daniel Miller remix of Shame, and then it has a William Orbit mix of Backlash, which, along with Hearts and Minds, my favorite Nitzer Ebb track. I played Backlash, this remix of it, in a DJ set 4 or 5 years ago, and it destroyed. Like, it was a new track. I mean, it still sounds good. William Orbit brings the goods here, man. Get this for the Backlash remix, because you can't find this in the US. This didn't get released in the US. So, excellent single, one of their best. This combined with Control I'm Here and Hearts and Minds makes this whole Belief experience their best album. That's why I think it's their best album. It's just the combination of Backlash and the William Orbit and the B-sides. It's just, altogether, it makes for their best album, I think, Belief. Nitzer Ebb's greatest moment. Now this just as an end to the video, I'm holding this up. This got released, I think, let me say 2004, I think, 2006. This basically is a collection of newer remixes at the time. And it's got some good stuff on here, good remixes. I would recommend picking this up if you can find it. Body rework, decent mixes. This got released with that, I think. Maybe, was it 2004? Yeah, this got released a couple of years before. These are two of the best mixes ever for Nitzer Ebb in terms of later mixes. It's got a Phil Kieran mix of Murderous, which is excellent. And then the great LFO Mark Bell remixes Control I'm Here on the B-side. Definitely worth picking up. And then this is another later remix EP they put out. Thomas Heckman did a version of Join in the Chant, which isn't very good. And then Derek May does a remix of Shame, which also not very good. As much as I love Derek May, the guy hasn't made a good record in like 30 plus years, has he? Like he did, he did It Is What It Is and Strings of Life, and he did his stuff in the late 80s, and then he disappeared, and he really hasn't done anything since. I mean, that's his choice, but where'd you go, Derek May? Where have you been? I hold this up as a curiosity, Diet Crups with Nitzer Ebb. They put this out in 1989. after the Belief album. Good record. I hold it up just as a curiosity piece. So there you go. There's my Nitzer Ebb video. I really love this band. Listening to them recently, recording their vinyl to digital. It was cool to listen to these records again, sort of, put my current spin on them. It's fun to listen to a record. It's a different experience, right? To listen to an album in 1990 and to put all your current issues on top of the album at that time, and then listen to it now in 2022, considering the world around us and putting that sort of spin on the music and having a totally new experience with it. But I've always felt like Belief is my favorite record. I felt that then. I felt maybe listening to the albums now, I might change my mind on that, but I still feel that Belief is my favorite. And again, it's because of the Hearts and Mind remixes, Backlash, William Orbit, Time Slips By is a great track, and just the album itself, the tracks on Belief that weren't singles, like Blood Money, which is a song about American evangelists, or TWA, which was about the hostage flight in the 80s. What was it, TWA 437 or something? That track is about, there's some politically charged tracks on this Belief album, and they always had that, but I think it was more overt on the Belief album, which I like. I kind of like it sometimes when people mix dance culture with politics. It can be kind of fun if it's done in a subtle way, and they did that. So as much as I love that Total Age, which I do, and Showtime, and Ebbhead, which I didn't like at the time and I've grown to like, and Big Hit, which I still think was a big miss, Belief is my favorite. But I love them all. I love Nitzer Ebb, and I know they're still around. I know they just came to town last year. I didn't go see them because of COVID. I just don't want to be out and about in public with a pandemic going on. And I also heard that Doug McCarthy collapsed right before a show. So I hope he's doing okay. People who know more about that, you can fill me in. But I heard that he collapsed, maybe a heart condition. I mean, the dude's getting up there. What is he, 60? He must be well into his 50s by now. So these are the things that happen. You start getting older and shit goes wrong. So I hope Doug McCarthy's okay. But anyway, that's my Nitzer Ebb video. I really love this band, and it was fun to rediscover all their records, to listen to them so much so long ago, and then sort of to listen to their stuff again under this new world was kind of fun. And I had different opinions about certain albums like Ebbhead, but for the most part, I felt the same about their catalog, and I still love Belief. So if you're gonna start with Nitzer Ebb, you haven't heard much of them, I would say start at that Total Age and just go up through Big Hit. I can't recommend Industrial Complex because it came out 15 years later after their core group of albums. So I feel like it's a little unfair to lump that record in to their other catalog. It just seems like it's so far removed from what they did, that it almost deserves to be part of a different conversation. But that's just my opinion. So anyway, there's my Nitzer Ebb video.